All right, so I talked a little bit about how the animation and things like that kind of affect the feel of the game. So now let's talk a little bit about the level design. So on the broad strokes, the general concept is there's a specific thing. This is a jump and shooting game. This is not a shoot and jump game. This isn't a run and gunner. And so then this isn't a beat 'em up, and I highlight those in specific. The the thing is that there's a way that play is done, and there's a way that obstacles are done in these types of games. And particularly the Mega Man games has a particular flavor of it. Now, with X8, I feel that they missed the mark on that flavoring. Rather, instead of it being the metropolitan that Mega Man X is, it's closer to a chocolate vanilla. Um, so, in other words, the the thing of it is that when you look at the design of the levels in Mega Man X8, while you're still doing jumping and shooting, the pace is off. And by that I mean there are a number of points where in most Mega Man games, you have full control over how fast you go through the stage, and you have full control over how fast you go through the stage, and it's rare, if ever, that you're forced to wait. Now, there might be a position or two where you're on a moving platform and you have to time your jump, but that's not necessarily waiting because the platform is still taking you somewhere. And the other and probably one of the most annoying platform things in Mega Man, because it forces you to wait, is those rhythmic platforms that they have a specific timing and you have to do it very, very accurately and everything. I digress. For Mega Man X8, there are several points in the stages where you are forced to slow down and wait. And so I'll just hit a couple of those. So, firstly, you have the Roosters stage, which is a volcano, and it starts with you coming down into the volcano. Now, uh, normally this would be a thing of where you just kind of have some platforms and you're kind of doing some blind drops. And I think the designers didn't want the player to have to do blind dropping, so instead they have it be a forced scroll down. And the problem is that this means that the player doesn't have control over how fast they go through the stage. And moreover, that because it's this scroll down, there's a constant pit of instant death below you that you have to pay attention to and wait for the platforms to come up out of. And so it's a point where there's a lot of hurry up and wait, and the pacing is done such that it's not really all that engaging to deal with the platforms. In fact, just when you're looking at also even the enemy placement on there, and some of the obstacle placement, it just doesn't. It's not quite as engaging as it could be. So that's one of the hurry up and wait situations. The other would be in Gravity Antonian stage, which for this one, I'm actually going to reference other implementations of the inversion of gravity concept because it's been done in the Mega Man games before, and I would say arguably better. So, Gravity Antonian stage, right? It's you cause the stage to flip, and then things fall, and then now you've got a new space. So there's an intrinsic weight there, right? So when you hit a button, the stage turns, and that takes time. and then the blocks fall, and that's some more time spent, and now you're able to play again. Contrast this with the implementation of gravity inversion in Mega Man 5, where there are bars in the background with up and down arrows. And if the arrow is down, this is normal gravity. If the arrow is up, it's inverted gravity. And so if you have them like this, the character will jump towards the item. Oh, all right, I forgot, I'm mirrored here. So if you have them like this, the character will jump towards the arrow, and what would normally be an arc becomes an S. So they actually go whoop, kind of thing, because their jump arc goes up, inverts, and when they would normally fall down, they instead fall up. And so there's a couple of things that this real-time gravity change does. It makes it so that it's a lot more dynamic. It also makes it a lot more, it feels a little bit more visceral. And it's a bit disorienting, but that's a part of the whole concept. And there's a lot that you can work with just from more Twitch response platforming as opposed to puzzle platforming, which is the primary engagement you get from Gravity Antonian stage. And when we consider that Mega Man is a jump and shooter, this is more of a reflexive, reactive style game. This is the thing where you're acting on the game or the game is acting on you, and you're responding to how the game's acting on you, or you are acting on the game and seeing how the game responds to you. In either case, with Gravity Antonian stage, it's more that the game presents a thing, you think about how it's supposed to work, and then you implement your solution. And so that's a breakage in the general rhythm that you normally see in a Mega Man game. And it's a little bit, it's something where if there weren't more breakages like this in the way that the pacing of the game worked, I'd be maybe a little bit softer on it, because it's still one of the stages I more enjoy to play in X8. But I think that's more because there aren't as many just good ones, just straight out good standard Mega Man play. So then we get to the Dark Mantis or Shade Mantis or Shadow Mantis or whatever his thing is. And his stage has you doing some Solid Snake sneaking action, right? And so you've got spotlights that you've got to avoid, and if you hit the spotlights, enemies come out and you blow them up. If the spotlights weren't there, the stage itself would be pretty straightforward from a platforming standpoint, just with the way that it's designed, at least for that early portion of it. And moreover, just having that concept kind of there, it encourages a slower pace. And it's the kind of thing, just even from the way that it's presented, I mean, this is a sneaking mission. So it's already kind of not necessarily anathema to what you would normally do in a Mega Man game, but it definitely doesn't, it's not quite matched up to what it normally is, which is go in and beat the bad guys. Navigate the maze, get to the bad guys. So it is still one of the more fun stages to play, because you're still kind of doing elements of the Mega Man stuff, and later on you get to do some cool platforming and stuff. But overall, it's still kind of it misses a little bit of the mark in some regards. If we go back to Mega Man X2, there's an implementation of the search items, but instead of it being that it produces enemies that you need to kill, it actually sets the place into, if I remember correctly, it basically sets the place into warning mode, and so there's some other obstacles that you have to deal with. But in essence, if you want to do something like that in a game that is platforming focused, you want the obstacles to be more platforming style things, either enemies that require you to start managing your jumps a bit better, or actually changing the geometry that you have to deal with because you've been detected now. Something like that. Maybe different paths or what have you. But then we get to Trilobite stage, which again takes the player's control of the pace of the stage away at the very beginning. And this is because you're being chased by a giant robot. And so again, this is one of those things of where if this wasn't such a common thing in X8, I wouldn't have as much of a problem with it. But because it is, this doesn't feel quite as good. This doesn't feel like this is kind of a nice diversion. This is like, we're doing this again. Even though as a player, even though it's presented as a different veneer, the same thing is happening, and even you won't be able to put a word to it, but you will be getting frustrated with it. At any rate, so in this stage, you're chased by a giant robot, and he does massive damage. You can't really do anything to him. You just have to get to the end of the stage, and then then you have to backtrack through the stage chasing after him. And so there's another issue with this particular design, which is specifically that the obstacles were made to be hard obstacles for you to deal with when you're going towards the big crane that smacks the big bad dude in the head and then forces him to go the opposite direction. But when you're coming back, those traps and things aren't nearly as threatening, and it's also the fact that you've already traversed this before. And so when it comes to backtracking, one of the important things is to make it so that the dynamic of how you interact with the stage changes when you're going back through it in the reverse. Because if that dynamic doesn't really change in a more challenging way or in an engaging way, then it's just play the stage again. And so that's the problem that Trilobite stage has, is that when you go backwards through this stage, it doesn't create new engagement. It's easier than it was to get through under all of that time pressure and everything. And so it just it falls a little bit flat. And then finally we have the Sunflower stage, which is, this is one of the reasons why I mentioned this is not a beat 'em up, because that stage basically has a series of sectors that transport you to a scene where you have to beat up a thing. And while there is a little bit of platforming involved, it's mostly just kill the thing quickly or kill the things quickly. And because most of the engagement in Mega Man comes from dodging attacks and dealing with enemies, and the enemies that they present don't have complex enough attack patterns to really make it interesting to deal with them in a boss rush sort of fashion. It doesn't hit as well. And I mean, even when we think to the boss rushes in previous games, the innovation that they did in X, where it's not just all in one room. I think a lot of players preferred that to what we get in all the other games, which is, here's all the bosses here in one space, just do them one right after another. Because for the fact that the platforming is a lot more where you get the engagement in these games, facing off of the bosses one after another, assuming even with them being kind of well designed, and even if you have their weaknesses, it can feel like a chore. It's better as a thing of an end cap to a stage. But anyway, that it's not a beat 'em up, and so there's elements of the play that you just don't have the strength of engagement for. Where, like, say Kirby, for instance, which is a platformer that after Superstar Saga, you have the ability to control your character like a fighting game character, where you have a bunch of special moves, you have some defensive options, and the enemies are designed to work in that way, where you can kind of combo them, you can pick them up off the ground, and the enemies themselves have their own little stuffs that you have to deal with. And so there's an intrinsic engagement to going in on enemies in that game. And so when we got to Kirby Superstar Saga, we were able to have zones where it's just like beat the enemies, and that is fun. For the Megaman X8, even with a character like Zero, who you think would function well in that beat 'em up scenario, the problem is that the enemies themselves are not designed to create engagement in that way. They're supposed to be able to be quickly dispatched because they are platforming obstacles first and enemies second. And you can kind of see that in the way that they're designed, where there's not much other than, shoot them, get out of the way of the shot, shoot them, get out of the way of the shot. And so there's some extra design space that would need to be executed on to make it so that those blow them all up sections are more engaging, at least in my opinion. And we'll get to the actual character implementations and why I feel they're a bit weaker than they have been in previous games. But that'll be another point. So that's the sunflower stage, and I mean, it's one of the ones that I would play through every once in a while, but I don't. It's not one that I repeatedly go back to. And so we've hit the rooster, we've hit the mantis, we've hit the sunflower, and so we have the Man of War stage, which is not platforming. It's just a rather confusing ride. Motorbike stage, where you're just chasing the character through some signs, and the way that it's presented is really weird, and it just doesn't quite work. Then we have the Abominable Snowman stage, which is again, it's another riding stage, and so we've got two of those in this game. Which, I mean, generally speaking, you should only really have one in a Mega Man 8 game, just to kind of break things up, and even then, a lot of players kind of have a negative conception of those stages just because of how they shift the paradigm and everything. But so you have two of those in this particular game, and then you have Bamboo Pandemonium stage, which is it's kind of good. I don't really have much to say about it. I mean, it's got this cool ride armor thing going on, where you're trying to carry the ride armor throughout the entirety of the stage, and there's some good platforming that you do in there, and I mean, it does still do the same faux pas of beat up all the enemies in a game that's not really made to make that fun. And so that's kind of my conception of the things, and I think, I don't know if I've hit all the levels. I feel like I've missed one at some point here, but you get the general gist. A running issue with the design of the stages in Mega Man X8 is that they take the player's control of the pace away. And that pace control is a big part of how all the other previous Mega Man X games work. And so you can rush through these stages really, really quickly if you know what you're doing. But if you don't, you can kind of take your time and pick your way through. But at the same time, the pace control is in your corner, and you're never really forced to wait. You're never really forced to hold up, okay, this is going to happen. Ergo, we get to Jacob's Elevator, which is, that's a beat-em-up stand-in. That's a big beat-em-up concept, is the elevator where a bunch of enemies show up, and then you blow them up. And so I've already spoken about the concept of this is a jump and shooter, not a beat 'em up. Why are we doing this? And Jacob's Elevator is just a lot of hurry up and wait. we're moving, and then some enemies start coming down, and then we kill those enemies, and then we wait until we get to a platform. Then some enemies come out, we kill them, and then we start moving again. And so, granted, the amount of downtime between enemy engagements is a lot quicker because I think the developers were a lot more aware of what they were doing there. But at the same time, it still comes back to the fact that this is a platformer first and a shooter second. And so being in scenarios where you've got to, where you need to destroy all the enemies is less engaging than being in scenarios where you need to platform precisely and deal with this specific enemy, or in scenarios where you're dealing with a boss that has very specific things that you need to dodge and learn how to dodge. So that's my take on the Jacob's Elevator stage. I mean, I love the music for the stage, and low-key, I do have a guilty pleasure of playing it myself. But that's just, that's just kind of me. I do enjoy just blowing stuff up. So, as much as I talk about the fact that it's out of sync with what your average Mega Man game is, I feel that there is a part of me that wants the games to actually get more of that involved combat feel to it and actually refine that element of things, particularly since Zero exists. But I'll get to that. But as it stands, it's as it stands, what they did in this game was they tried a paradigm. They superimposed a paradigm from a different genre that doesn't really work with the genre that they're in. And so the moon base, it's fine. It's a good level. I don't really have much to say about it. Lots of spikes. And I think the Sigma characters the Sigma enemies are actually well designed as enemies that are obstacles for first and enemies second. And that's what I have to say on the stage design. All right, so I'm going to stop recording so I don't break my memory again. Thank you for listening to this broadcast from Vernacular Games. I'm Redcoat, founder of Vernacular Games. If you'd like to see some of the other things that we have done, you can check out our game, Highway to the Moon, on Steam and itch.io. It is a scrolling shoot-'em-up with omnidirectional aiming, and some interesting little shenaniganry going on. We also have Legends of Mathmatica Squared, a tongue-in-cheek RPG, classical-style RPG, with math puns galore, puzzle dungeons, and an active time battle system. In addition, we've also released a children's storybook called The Fairy and the Dragon. We did this in partnership with Inertia Productions and their author and the lead author, Jeffrey Morgan. You can find that book on BookBaby, also Amazon, but you might have a hard time finding it there. Additionally, we are working with a client to get a card game out into the world. It is called Record Biz. The client, in particular, Brian Garrett, he is actually a member of the record business, and he wanted to impart his knowledge to the world. And what better way to do that than with a game? And so that is the mission, let's say. So it's building a card game that kind of operates a little like Monopoly. It's got a lot more agency than Monopoly does, if I'm honest, and allows you to take up the mantle of a record tycoon and deploy your mans out to different performance venues and record songs and make money off of those song assets. So it's a nice thing. It's a really cool thing. If you want to try that, if you want to check that game out when it comes out, we've got a waiting list that's going to be underneath this channel, underneath this video, that you can just click on it, go there, get on the list, and then as soon as new things come out, we will let you know. It'll be great. It'll be great. Now, with that out of the way, There are other things that Vernacular Games is working on. However, it's been a bit of a slog of a year, I'll be honest. But hopefully, we'll have things to announce to you in the coming months. But until then, you've got me as a talking head to listen to. Hi. So, without further ado, this is Redcoat, signing off. Play the games you want to play, boyos. Also like and subscribe!